Alright, sorry if we have any audio issues. I guess we'll find that out here soon. So, you're looking to buy an 01 to 07 Chevy Silverado 2500 HD. Well, then this is the video for you. On my right, I have my 07 Chevy Silverado 2500 HD Classic. It being the Classic just means it's leftovers from 06. This has the LBZ Duramax transmission and the 6-speed automatic Allison transmission. On my left, I have my 2001 GMC Sierra 2500 HD with the 8.1 liter big block gas engine and the 5-speed Allison transmission. Voiceover Max here. There is something extremely important that I need to mention. This has to do with the 5-speed and 6-speed Allison transmissions. I want to point your attention to the shift indicator on the Allison 6-speed. We have P for park, R for reverse, N for neutral, D for drive, M for manual mode, and 1 for first gear. Also note the plus and minus on the gear shift lever. What I want to talk about is manual mode. This was introduced in 2006 with the Allison 6 speeds, so you can only get it on the 06 and 07 Classic body style. Basically, this lets you pick whatever gear you want to be in with the touch of a button. It is an absolutely fantastic option for these trucks, but not that much better than the 5-speed, to be honest. Now let's look at the shift indicators on the Allison 5-speed. We have the normal, park, reverse, neutral, drive, 3, 2, 1, just like you would with a 4-speed like a 4L80 or something. And we just have the normal shift lever that you'd get with like a 4-speed. There's no plus or minus. Both trucks have the push button on the end of the shift lever to activate your tow haul mode. What this means for the 01 and 02 models is that we do not have the option to lock it in 4th gear, at least not from the factory. This isn't necessarily a problem, but it is a serious annoyance when you are towing heavy and could lead to premature failure of your transmission because the transmission keeps shifting between 4th and 5th. There are some aftermarket fixes for this that involve installing a switch to lock your transmission out of 5th gear so it won't shift to 5th. With that activated, drive would essentially just be 4th gear. As far as I can tell on the Allison 5-speed transmissions on the 03 and newer trucks, if you activate tow haul mode and hold the tow haul button, it will lock out of 5th gear. Basically, if you have an 02 and 03 truck side by side with the same mileage and the same condition for the same price, it's a no-brainer to get the 03 so you have this overdrive lockout. Otherwise, if you have the 01 or 02 model, you can do the lockout mod. The hardest part about that is just taking your truck somewhere to have the transmission control module like reflashed, having the software updated basically. So let's start with the Duramax. I've had this Duramax for about a year and a half, and I've had the GMC for a couple months. I originally bought this Duramax to tow whatever I wanted to put behind it, but I've decided that I wanted to go with my 8.1 instead. We'll get into why I picked the 8.1 over the why I picked the 8.1 over the LBZ Duramax in a little bit. But let's start with the exteriors. All of the GMCs have this grille and light setup from 01 to 06. So I talked about the grille and light setup on the GMC, so let's talk about the Silverados now. This is called the cat eye due to the fact that the headlights are angled down at the top. Makes it look mean and angry, like a cat, I guess. Some people think that. They started the cat eye in 2003. Before then, it was they called it the bubble eye, and I'll put a picture of that up here. Personally, I do not like the cat eyes, but on this Duramax with the ranch hand bumper, I've grown to not mind it. I think the GMC front end looks better, in my opinion. Let's talk cab and bed styles real quick. So the Duramax is a crew cab short bed, which means it has a 6.5 foot bed. If we look at our GMC over here, it's a regular cab with an 8 foot bed. One of the reasons I'm selling my Duramax is because I wanted a long bed. I originally didn't think I needed a long bed until I started looking at fifth wheel hitches and stuff, and I realized you can get by with a short bed, but a long bed's just easier. But this is just one of many reasons. I started looking at putting the fifth wheel hitch in this truck, and then I realized it's not really feasible with this truck because, one, it already has a gooseneck hitch in the bed, and with that gooseneck hitch, the cab of the truck would be too close to the front of the camper, the fifth wheel camper. Now if we look at the GMC, the hitch is going to be right around the rear axle, right about there, and we've got plenty of room to the front of the cab. It's probably going to be about 4 foot from the front of the camper to the front of the cab, if not more. Compared to the Duramax, yes, the hitch is there, but it's slightly forward than the axle, which isn't a big deal, but I've got a sliding fifth wheel hitch that I'm going to put in the GMC, and it just makes it a lot easier to just go with a factory, well, aftermarket, go with a fifth wheel setup instead of trying to use this gooseneck setup. Plus, it is pretty close to the cab. I'd say, I think I measured it, it's like 32 inches or something. It's pretty close. So if you're going to look at one of these trucks and you plan on towing a fifth wheel, I would recommend getting a long bed. I mean, you could use a fifth wheel hitch in the back of this, but you'd have to remove the gooseneck or use an adapter, or it's just, to me, it's a lot simpler to just use a normal fifth wheel setup on the GMC. So let's talk power real quick, the engines that these trucks have. So we're going to start with the LBZ. These are factory torque specs and power specs, so take it with a grain of salt because, you know, that was 20 some odd years ago. So on the Duramax, it makes 360 horsepower at 3,200 RPM and a whopping 650 pound-foot of torque at 1,600 RPM. And it does like being around 1,600 RPM. The 8.1 makes 340 horsepower at 4,200 RPM. So it makes it at a higher RPM than the LBZ, and it makes 455 pound-foot of torque at 3,200 RPM, which is where it likes to be, around 3,200 RPM-ish, 3,000, somewhere around there. That's where it seems happy. So obviously the Duramax is by far more powerful than the 8.1, and it will put you back in your seat and snap your neck when that turbo spools up. That's one thing that when you put your foot to the floor in this truck or give it any throttle at all, it'll just put a smile on your face. So let's get into the interior of each truck, starting with the Duramax, and compare them. Alright, so we're in the LBZ Duramax, and I've got it running just so you can kind of hear a little bit of background noise and what it sounds like in here when the engine's idling. Here we got our gauge cluster, you got everything you need. Engine coolant temperature over there, might be a little hard to see. We got our fuel gauge, we got our amp meter over there, I think that's what it's called. You know, tells you the voltage of your battery. You got oil pressure. Now in these Duramaxes, it's going to sit at about 60 to 70 psi of oil pressure when the engine is cold and idling, and about 25 to 30
usually right at 30 when the engine is warm up to temp. Of course, we got our speedometer there, and we've got a tachometer and our transmission temperature sensor, or sorry, transmission temperature gauge. If we move to the left, we've got our four-wheel drive switches. This is your cargo light, exterior cargo light, or cab light. We've got fog light button, which this truck doesn't have anymore because of the aftermarket bumper. Then of course we got our let's see, brightness, and if we turn that all the way up, brings our interior lights on. Then we got our normal light switch, and this is your dome override. So what this does is when it's out, when the doors open, the interior lights will come on, and if we push it in and open the door, the interior lights stay off. Now this is, I haven't usually found a use for it, but if you're doing anything in here where you've got the door open for a long period of time, it's really nice to just be able to turn that off. Now features in here, we've got power windows, power locks, power mirrors. We've got tow mirrors on this. We've got steering wheel controls for the radio over here and seek and volume over here. We've got gauge cluster information, such as that. We've got fuel button down here to switch from, you know, distance till empty to fuel used and all that. And you got this one here, which you'd think would be for lights or something, but now that I look at it, it looks like a little road with clouds. But anyways, we press that button and it'll tell us our odometer and trip and all that other stuff. So let's switch it back to fuel used. So this has a double din Bose sound system, just factory stereo. I say it's got the Bose sound system. Basically that gets you this upgraded radio. I'm not sure if the speakers change, but I do know that you get a different amplifier than a normal. If I remember correctly, the speakers run off an amplifier instead of just the head unit, and there is a subwoofer down here underneath the center console. This is just my maintenance information and such. We've got a couple cup holders up here, a couple slots there and there, cigarette lighter there and there, or battery phone charger, something like that. We've got dual climate air zone control, which is nice, but in these trucks it's usually pretty finicky. Like, it's kind of hard to explain. When you first start it up, it's kind of got a mind of its own, and it won't stay on what you set it at. Like when you shut the truck off, you gotta reset it every time. It's just a little finicky. It's not that big of a deal. Now, I do want to talk about these seats. I think they started these seats in, I want to say 03, which is when they changed from a 1.5 din to this double din, and they changed gave it a facelift, and they changed these seats and the center console. The center console, if you get this system in a 01 and 02, it does look a little bit different than this one. Of course, we got some storage in there as well. Of course, that's going to get in the way. Anyways, these seats. These seats, in my opinion, are more comfortable than the earlier models. It's not by much, but it just feels like it's a little bit more ergonomic. And you do have these little fold down armrests. Although they're kind of like too far close to you, so I always rest my arm just right there. And that's what I end up doing in the GMC as well. Now, if we look up, we see a little overhead console here, some storage there, and your 2 lights. And then if you had a sunroof, which was an option, although it was rare in these trucks, it would be there. And another thing I wanted to mention about these seats is they're cloth, obviously. Leather is an option in these vehicles, but the cloth does hold up better than the leather over time. Also, if we come back over here, sometimes you will have, I forget what they call it, but you have a little switch here, up and down, and it controls the pedal. It controls the brake and gas pedal. So if you're shorter or taller than most people, you've got some actually adjustable, movable pedals, which it comes in handy. I had it in my 2004 Suburban, and it was nice, I guess. I don't miss it though. Like, I wouldn't seek a truck out just for that option. There is one thing I should probably mention. If we are talking about Suburbans, there is an optional quadra-steer option for Suburbans, and it basically lets your rear wheels turn a little bit so you get a tighter turning radius. I've heard a lot of people like that system. I've never had it though, so I don't want to speak too much on it. I just wanted to let you know for the Suburbans that is an option. I think that's everything up here, so we're going to move to the back seat real quick. Alright, so we're in the back seat of the Duramax right now, and we do have power windows, of course, and we do have speakers back here. But I wanted to mention that if we look down here, we have an AC vent there and an AC vent there. We have cup holders down here, and we also have a fold down center armrest that has cup holders. I don't know how much to trust these though, because they're a little too wide. Other than that, we have a rear, I don't know what you'd call this. I would call it like a secondary radio control or something. Basically, if you had kids back here and they wanted to listen to a different station, you can plug your headphone jacks in and listen to the headphones, and then only the front speakers would be playing whatever station that radio is set to. And back here, your passengers can be listening to a different station. Neat concept, neat feature, but I never really thought how that would be too useful nowadays with, I mean, even back then you had MP3 players and stuff, but regardless, one last thing I wanted to mention about feature-wise back here is if we look up, we've got just a dome light, but if you had a higher trim level truck, you would have a rear entertainment system back here. And basically what that would be a flip down screen and a little DVD player to watch Pocahontas or whatever old Pixar or Disney movie your kids wanted to watch. And I do want to say a few things about these rear seats. One, of course they're comfortable, but a couple more things. Alright, so about these back seats. So you do have storage underneath, and you have storage behind the seat. So what I'm going to do is pull on this little lever. That's going to bring the bottom of the seat forward. I'm going to go ahead and move this fuel filter real quick. And then the back seat folds down. Preferably I would put the front seat forward a little bit, and maybe this would clear or remove the headrest, but I don't feel like doing that. I just wanted to show you that there's a little bit of room behind the back seat, and if you remove that headrest or had enough room, this back seat would fold flat, well, pretty much flat down, and you'd have some more room for whatever you're putting back here. But in my opinion, you'd have more room just putting stuff on the seat and then putting stuff on the floorboard. Alright, so we're going to head over to the GMC now. Alright, so we're in the GMC 8.1 liter right now, and just wanted to show you the differences. So since this is a two-wheel drive, we just have a little cubby hole here, normal ace or headlight controls. We have the cargo lamp button, no fog lamps on this truck, and we do still have the dome override. I've got a brake controller set up in here, and of course this truck doesn't have the pedals. Wanted to mention that the door panels are slightly different, as well as this truck has crank windows and no power locks because it's a very, very base model. This is basically a work truck model. It's a SL, which is one of the lowest trim levels. Steering wheel, no steering wheel controls. Those were not an option until 2003. Same with the Bose sound system. Actually, the Bose sound system might have been an option on earlier models, but I don't think it was. If we look at the gauge cluster, it's pretty much the exact same, just minor differences. Like this one doesn't have the extra features included with the gauge cluster, like distance till empty and all that. You do have a message system for emergencies and other stuff, like if you're low on oil or low on transmission fluid or low on, well, I don't know about transmission fluid, but if you're low on washer fluid, it'll come on and say that, check washer fluid. In this truck, it's quite a bit quieter than the Duramax because you don't have that clunky diesel. You do hear a bit of a whine in this truck because of the 5-speed Allison. You don't hear that on the Duramax, and I really think that's just because the engine is so much louder on the Duramax. If we go to the stereo, this is called what's a 1.5 DIN. So if you want an aftermarket stereo in this truck, your best bet's going to be a single DIN, because a double DIN requires a lot of modification and it's sort of expensive and just kind of a pain in the ass in my opinion. You've got really simple AC, HVAC controls, super simple. It's all real easy to understand. Down here we've got 3 charging ports, and this is from a different truck. I think this is from a crew cab or something. Same as the seats. These seats are actually from a crew cab. The original seats in this truck would have been like half vinyl and half cloth. This truck also has a rubber floor lining, so no carpet in this truck. And then here on the other truck, it is just a little cubby. However, on this truck, it holds your airbag controls, and that's because if you had a kid in here, you'd want the airbag off, since it's a regular cab and not an extended cab or crew cab. Actually, on the extended cabs, you still have that for some reason. But let's see. The center console is, I would say you have more storage in this center console than in the full center console. Just a bunch of crap I got in there. Anyways, in my opinion, because of where my arm lines up on these trucks, I like this center console better than the one in the Duramax. This one's a little bit wider, and with my arm just sitting here, or arm on the wheel and sitting here, it's on the padded part and not any of the plastic. And then of course with this tray, you've got, you know, you can put stuff there and it's going to slide around, but it's not going to fall out. The Duramax does the same thing, but there's a little bit of storage behind these seats. But the main thing you probably want to know is, do you sit too upright or not? and this is what really surprised me when I looked at this truck, is this seat reclines quite a bit because of, well, maybe not quite a bit, but I am very comfortable in this truck. I'm 6 foot. I've got probably 4 inches of headroom, if the headliner wasn't sagging. And the seat is reclined back comfortably. I'm very comfortable in this truck. This Duramax too, but I'm just, for a regular cab, I'm surprised at how comfortable this truck is. The Duramax has a little area on the rearview mirror here that gives you your compass reading, north, northeast, such as that, and it has your outside temperature. This truck does not have that, but it's really not an issue to me. So with that, I think we're done in the interior. Let's go to the engine bay. Alright, so we're underneath the hood of the Duramax, and this thing is the problem child, and the main reason why I do not want to keep this truck, even though I paid $18,000 for it. And we'll talk about that later, but I actually did forget about, wanted to show you guys what all I've done on these trucks. Alright, so we're underneath the hood of the Duramax. I wanted to show you guys what all I've replaced. So just glancing at this engine, you'd be like, hey, that thing looks like really easy to work on. Well, you'd be wrong. There's not a lot on this engine that you can do that doesn't require ripping a lot of stuff off. For example, the turbo is way the hell back there underneath the cowl, just crammed back there. It's, if I remember it, it's like a 10-hour job to pull that turbo off. And usually there'd be even less room because I removed the resonator that sits here. That's what that guy is. It's just a block off. So that's in the I just did that because I can get easier access to stuff, and it looks a little better than the original resonator. Now let's start with stuff I did to this truck. So I bought it to pull a camper. I pulled the camper before I got the truck. Sorry for the couple stains. I don't know what the hell that came from. So I started pulling this camper, and it's about 13,000 pounds, and the truck started overheating. I'm like, hey, this thing's a Duramax. Why the hell is it overheating? Well, because this is a turbocharged engine, you have an AC condenser right here, you've got an intercooler, and then your radiator, along with a transmission cooler up here, auxiliary transmission cooler, and a power steering pump. But those aren't really in the way of anything. However, what happens on these Duramaxes is over time, dirt builds up in between the intercooler and the AC condenser, and the intercooler and the radiator. So I had to pull the entire fucking, they call it a cooling stack, out of this truck, completely out of the truck, pressure wash it down, and stick it back in the truck. Get it nice and clean so air can flow through there no problem. Now, that did great. Doesn't have any cooling issues. Hell, it's got 2 thermostats, so why would it? So while I was in there, I replaced the thermostats. I replaced this upper radiator hose. And then I started reading, and people are like, hey, these lower radiator hoses on these trucks go bad and get really thin over time. And it's this big ant colony underneath this truck that connects to multiple different things. So I'm like, alright, well, I'll replace that. Well, that was like fucking $200, and that was the cheap one. Granted, it's GM genuine, but you're paying a discount because you're getting it from Rock Auto instead of the dealership or something. Long story short, I've got probably well over 100 hours, man-hour of labor replacing shit on this truck. I put a new power steering pump on it because the power steering pump was burned up. New power steering lines, pressure line, return line, you know, that stuff. Put a new belt on it. Now, I want to say something. If this doesn't scare you yet, if you think, you know, that doesn't sound too bad, good on you. Just, if you buy a diesel, there's a reason why they're so expensive. The buy-in's expensive, that maintenance is expensive, the parts are expensive, everything's expensive on a diesel. So, this fan is a pain in the ass. It is a pain in the ass to do a belt on this. With you got to loosen this fan shroud. You got to remove the actual fan shroud. You got to loosen the fan cage. Usually you end up pulling the AC compressor for a lot of this stuff because it's just those 4 bolts and it comes up out of the way. But to get to the tensioner to replace the belt on this truck, you have to remove the air box. You have to remove the rubber intercooler tube that's down there that connects to here and goes down to the intercooler. And it's just a lot of stuff that has to come off this truck to maintain it. It's a royal pain in the ass. Now this truck is stock. Now there's a lot of modifications people do to these trucks. Cold air intakes. I've heard cold air intakes on these trucks are useless because apparently this original airbox is good for up to 500 horse, but that's just what I've heard. This whole system right here, I think it's called the EGR. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But because of that EGR, your it's either the, I think it's the down pipe that goes from the, oh shoot, where does it go? I forget where it goes, but the, you know, both the down pipe and up pipe on this truck are pretty restrictive because of this crap, the EGR, and also they basically bent inwards the the up pipe, I think it was, due to there not being a lot of, I'm rambling. Too long didn't read of this is everything's a pain in the ass to get to. Usually a lot of stuff has to come off or out of the engine bay to do anything. I can't tell you how many times that I've pulled that driver's side fender well to do anything over on that side of the engine. So just to go down what I've replaced on in this engine bay on this truck before, real quick. Vane position sensor, I kept getting a code for that. Turned out it was the air filter was just completely clogged up. I got KYB shocks front and rear, added a CTS3 monitor, added an EGT probe for the CTS3. That CTS3 is on the dashboard that it's to the right of the HVAC controls. It just gives you a lot of information that's nice to have, intake temperature and all that. Driver's door speaker, because the ding when you leave the key in the truck or leave the door opener, or leave the key in the ignition and open the door, it'll go ding ding ding. Most cars have a separate dinger for that, but on these trucks it goes through the driver's door speaker, so it blows that speaker out. Master window switch, because I was having issues with my mirrors. Rear brake pads and rotors, I got drilled and slotted. They're power stops because the rear pads on this truck were done for, and the rear rotors had pretty deep groove in them. Where are we at? Pads and rotors. Checked and filled diffs and lubed the front end. Here's where I replaced the thermostats, the upper and lower radiator hoses, cleaned the cooling stacks, replaced the serpentine belts. 3 of 22, or 3 of 24, sorry. Got new tires, underhood fuse panel replaced because I was having a lot of electrical issues, and it ended up breaking the truck, funny enough. Well, funny to y'all, not funny to me. I'm sitting there stressing my ass off, wondering why is my truck not starting. It was actually kept showing like check ABS or some crap on the dash. It turned out that there was just so much mouse piss in the underhood fuse block that it just got, stuff just started getting corroded in there. Then the last thing was the new power steering pump, new pressure and return lines to the Hydro Boost system. So on the Duramax engine bay, wait for this truck. Alright, so the Duramax engine bay, just wanted to mention the TLDR is, everything's just jammed in here. You've always got to pull something off before you can replace a part that's underneath it. It's just a royal pain in the ass. Now if we go to the 8.1, first of all, look at that. We've got an under hood light on the 2001, but not the 2007. Well, 6, whatever. Pretty interesting. So this one, it's a little too dark, I'm sorry, but everything is super easy to get to. I just did plugs and wires on this truck, and it was a breeze on the passenger side. And the only one that fights you on the driver's side is that farthest one back, and it's because it's at a goofy angle and sort of up against the firewall. I had to just play around with different extension sizes for the plugs, but intakes here, you know, you got an engine cover, not that that means anything. Your power steering fill is way up here, which is nice because you can actually get to it, unlike the one on the Duramax where it's just way down there. So the only issue, well, there's a couple issues these 8.1s have. I say issues, they're just stuff that happens. The way the PCV is designed on this engine, it ends up burning oil. GM says it's okay for it to burn about a quart of oil every 100,000, or sorry, a quart of oil every 1,000 miles. So just keep an eye on that, and if you go to look at one of these, make sure it's cold and actually check the oil before you start it. Because when I bought this one, I didn't check the oil till I got home because the guy was already driving it around, and it was 2 quarts low. So I mean, it holds like 7 to 9 quarts. The air filter is easy to get to. I guess that's about the same as the Duramax. I'm just gonna rant real quick. I hate these stupid coolant overflow tanks. It is impossible to add coolant to these coolant overflow tanks without it starting to come out the top because you added more than a quarter of a pint. I hate those so much. But back to the engine. You got to change the spark plugs regularly. I forget what people say, but more normal than a car. I think it's, most people do it every 5,000 miles or 15,000 miles or so. Because of the burning coolant, it fouls those plugs out pretty quick. Just a little quick thing of maintenance, really not that big a deal. All these GM trucks have issues with these lines, like for example the power steering line back there. they all have issues with these lines, the crimps failing, and they'll just seep until they start leaking. For example, the oil cooler lines on this truck were seeping when I bought it. Well, they were actively leaking, but I replaced those. Under the hood, I guess that's all I have to talk about. It's an 8.1 big block, but the block itself looks tiny, man. This intake is like half the size of the engine. It's easy to get to everything. It's pretty simple, honestly. It's really easy to maintain, and that's what I'm getting at. I like that this 8.1 is so easy to maintain, and if something goes bad, it's not going to be like, okay, your truck's down for an entire week because of some small issue, because everything's buried underneath everything else. So to go through what I did on this, I put an entirely new front suspension setup in it, and these trucks are just notorious for the front ends going out. People just don't maintain them, and they just drive them for 200,000 miles and don't worry about tire wear or anything. So, for example, when I bought this truck, it was wearing really badly on the inner, the outer edge of the tire. And this also had 20-inch rims on it, and it was lowered 2 inches, so I brought it back to stock. That way I can tow with it. So, upper control arms, shocks, upper control arm, hardware and bolts, because they went bad. Sway bar end links, because they're like 15 bucks, man. Alignment cam pins, that has to do with the upper control arm hardware. Lower control arm bushings and ball joints. And I just bought entire new upper control arms loaded. Kicker speakers, front and rear, because there was only one speaker in this truck that was working and only 2 that were installed. Did an alignment on it, and did inner and outer tie rods because they were cheap. It was like 20 to 30 bucks each for an inner tie rod, or like inner tie rods were like 25 each, outer tie rods were like 15 each. I serviced the transmission, did an internal and external filter, even though they say you only have to do the external spin-on filter, and did an oil change, the oil cooler lines, of course, and then on the back page, plugs and wires. And all that was very easy, except I had a hell of a time getting the transmission spin-on filter to seal. But so yes, this truck is not as powerful as the Duramax. However, it is a lot easier to maintain, and in my opinion, it's going to be significantly more reliable. There is one more thing. Oh, these LBZ engines, if you look hard enough, there are tons and tons of things that people are just like, yeah, this completely destroyed my engine, time to get a rebuild. And I'm talking like, for example, people will not, if somebody does a water pump on this truck, first of all, it's a pain in the ass. You got to pull everything. Well, actually, it might not be that bad, but the harmonic balancer is torqued to like, it's like 250 something foot-pounds, or it might be more than that. It's tight. If you don't tighten that enough, it'll spin off and it'll screw up the balance of the crankshaft, and you'll end up snapping a crank. Now, I made a post about this, and you know what most people said? They said swap the fucking crankshaft. Or sorry, not the crankshaft. They say, this hasn't happened to this truck. I'm just saying, I saw it as a possibility. I was going to put a better quality harmonic balancer on it. And then I started doing the research, and the reason the cranks that actually snap is because of the firing order of this engine. It puts a lot of pressure on the front of the crankshaft, And when that harmonic balancer starts spinning, that'll be the hair, what is it? The what on the camel's back? Oh, it'll be the last straw on the camel's back, and it'll snap your crankshaft in between the first and second cylinder from the front. And it's multiple things like that that can kill this engine, and people just don't talk about it, because a lot of diesel people do not give a shit what stuff costs. This truck could be flawless and amazing if you put 10 grand into modifications. And if I was going to redo this, if I was going to buy a Duramax again, I would buy one that is already modified and maybe built, because then some dumbass has already put all the money into a stock truck to make it bulletproof, and you know, then they're gonna have, yeah, they'll probably beat on it a little bit, but you know, you can bring it back to where it's stock height, then you can tow with it properly, instead of just having it as some truck to do burnouts and crap in. But yeah, if I was gonna do this over again, I would buy a Duramax that's already been emissions deleted, and because the only emissions is this, by the way, it's just that EGR. It doesn't have DEF or anything like that. That's why everybody likes these LBZs so much. It's because they're basically pre-emissions. So in my opinion, that's why I like my 8.1 better than my LBZ. Oh, last thing, let's talk about price. This truck has 122,000 miles. I paid $9,000 for this truck. Granted, I've put about $1,500 into it. This truck I paid $18,000 for, and I've put at least $3,000 into it just in parts. No labor, because I did everything myself. So in my opinion, that's why this truck is better than this one. And hopefully this helped somebody out there pick between a Duramax or LBZ Duramax compared to an 8.1 liter gasser, because there's not a lot of videos out there. There's like a couple guys doing like one guy doing a tug of war, and one guy doing a drag race. I'm pretty sure there's not a lot of videos of this out there. So I'm sorry for my rambling, the wind noise, and the shitty GoPro quality. Please forgive some of my mistakes, because I'm real new to this, and honestly I don't like editing. So I think that's gonna wrap it up, you guys. Just give you one last shot of it. Can't see shit because it's so dark. Alright, thanks for watching. See ya.